Okay, welcome everyone. My name is Daniel Cowan. I'm the founder of Big Star Lights. We're going to discuss a very common question we get, which is which model is right for their Christmas light installation business, the leasing model or the selling model, also known as a rent versus buy. It's it's one of the most common or one of the most important strategic decisions that you'll make as a pro installer. And it's a decision that you want to get right because it's more difficult to switch later as your business matures and after you've established your SOPs and even your expectations. We're gonna keep this really practical and use real world examples so you can confidently choose the right path, not only for your business but for your clients and your future. So, in the renting or leasing model, you own the lights and charge customers an annual rental or lease fee. So think of this as holiday lighting as a service in its true form. In the selling or buying model, the customer buys the lights up front. And so you make more profit the first year and you'll earn primarily from labor in the future, just labor only. Both models are working across North America. And what matters is what fits your location and your goals. In our experience, the selling model is the most common model used in Canada, and the renting and leasing model is most common in the US. And of course, there's pockets of variance around there, but just check with what your competitors are doing. We have seen hybrids before as well, which we'll talk a little bit about later. So in terms of ownership, obviously, if you're leasing the lights, you as a business owner, you're going to own the lights. In the selling model, the customer is going to own them. The fees are going to be in the leasing model. It'll be an annual fee that's charged. Often you can ask for 50% upfront, and then the other 50% after the installation. Same thing with the buying model, is just that the initial upfront purchase of the lights that will be done in the first year. Again, just charging a 50% deposit, and then 50% after the installation is completed. Not removal, installation. It's very difficult to chase money after the lights come down. In terms of maintenance, in a leasing model, you're responsible for the maintenance as the business owner during your entire relationship with that customer. Whereas in the selling model, you're responsible for the lights and making sure that they're in working order for the entire warranty period. If you buy your lights from us, of course, you know that we have a 5-year seasonal warranty. So, you'll be off the hook for that. And then, or the customer will be. And then after the 5 years is up, then the customer, you can pass that 5-year warranty on to the customer and they'll be responsible for any replacements from that point on. Now, storage. A lot of people have this preconceived notion that if you use a selling model, that the customer should store the lights. But that's not true. If the customer owns the lights, you can still store it for them. And I strongly recommend that you do that because you want to create as frictionless of a system as possible for your customers. You don't want to show up to the job and they're scrambling about trying to find the lights that they've been storing, not knowing if it's in the attic or in the basement. And it can be a huge waste of time. We've seen jobs canceled because they just couldn't find the lights in a timely manner, or they simply forgot to leave the lights out. And so now you're trying to juggle schedules in an already a really crammed season. So it's just easier, even if the customer owns the lights, that you store it for them, show up. The customer doesn't even need to be home, and you can do your work and they'll come home at the end of the day. And of course, the lights will be beautifully lit. In the leasing model, of course, you own the lights, so you'll store them, and that's a given. Revenue is obviously reoccurring and more predictable in a leasing model. In the selling model, it's obviously going to charge more up front, and then beyond that, it's just service on an annual basis, so the labor portion on an annual basis. And then we talked about the popularity. Yeah, the leasing is more common in the US, and the selling is more common in Canada. So let's talk a little about the pros and cons, just at a glance. So the revenue obviously is a little more steady and annual recurring revenue in the leasing model, whereas on the selling model, it's higher upfront revenue with immediate high profit margin. And of course, it's going to be less profit, but equal profit margins in subsequent years. So you get more of your money up front, or more profit up front. In terms of customer retention, leasing models, very high retention rates. We've seen, 90% retentions in a lot of cases, but honestly, it's equal in the selling model. Again, 90% retention rates. And as long as you include the free storage, as soon as you stop doing that, those retention rates tend to sink a little bit more. So it's well worth, even if you have to rent a storage space somewhere during the off season, to include free storage and just take care of that for your customer. The So the initial costs are obviously a little bit higher in the leasing model because you're going to be buying the lights for the first time and charging a little bit less, because the customer won't own the lights. Whereas in the selling model, the initial costs are lower because you're selling the lights for a higher profit. And especially for commercial, we'll talk about commercial in a minute, but think about what the job would look like if it was a six-figure job. Like, are you going to own, potentially $50,000 in lights and hold on to those, with the possibility that the customer stops working with you at some point in the future? Ongoing costs, obviously with maintenance in the leasing model, you're going to cover that maintenance throughout the relationship with the customer. But then again, in the selling model, you're only covering it for the first 2 to 5 years, or however long you want your warranty to be. So there's an advantage to the selling model there. In terms of storage, I wrote here incorrectly, but in the selling model, don't let the customer be responsible for the storage. You should honestly store the lights for them, just to keep it frictionless. And of course, in the leasing model, you're going to provide the storage. Risk, in terms of vandalism and risk, the leasing model, you're going to be, responsible for potentially damaged lights. And so if you're, again, doing commercial projects that have a lot of public exposure, that can potentially get a little bit risky, especially if you're offering illuminated sculptures or something like that, where a single sculpture can be, $15,000 to $20,000. If somebody decides to vandalize it, that's going to be a hit on your part. I suppose you could build terms into that, but that just gets messy. Everybody's going to walk away with a sour taste in their mouth. So now with the the selling model, the customer will assume all the risk. And so they're motivated to make sure they got security around, or if it's a public space, or that it's the lights are going to be protected from vandalism. In weather is another issue too. Like if you're prone to hurricanes or something like that, then the customer is at risk. And in the selling model, whereas in the leasing model, if you get a big storm blowing through and a good portion of your lights are damaged, you're going to be on the hook for that. When it comes to scalability, the leasing model is quite high, but I would say it's equally as high in the selling model. Like, I know both people running both models are doing north of 7 figures, and they equally succeed in scalability. But when it comes to commercial, in my experience, six-figure commercial jobs, for example, are typically use the selling model. If you look at the RFPs that are out there, they will often request, or they often won't request the leasing model. They're looking to buy the lights and then have a contractor look after them on a long-term basis. Now, in terms of the look, so the look of the products or the look of the design and the lights, when you use a leasing model, there's a chance that you're going to be moving lights around between different properties if you happen to lose that customer. Obviously, you own the lights. You're not going to throw them away. You're going to want to place them on a different property. But if you start mixing different vintages of lights, so if those lights are 5 years old versus 2 years old, next to the other ones on that same property, there'll be potentially a noticeable difference. And that could look bad if you mix those products. Whereas if it's a selling model, you'll of course the lights of a certain vintage will stay together on that property. But I want to just highlight here what I mean by how the lights will look different when you use different vintages. One thing to understand is that all LEDs have an inherent property where they lose their color, temperature, and brightness over a period of time. Once it hits about 80% of its original color and brightness, it's deemed to be about the end of its lifespan. So the trick is to get a product that prolongs the period of when it hits that 80% color and brightness index. And at Big Star Lights, we've done a number of things to prolong that period. It's one of the reasons why we can offer such a long warranty, which is 5 years. And here's an example of what that looks like. So you can see this pure white has turned to a dimmer, more blue color, and it doesn't look very good in these trees if you start mixing new with old. And what we've done and this is not our product here in this picture, this is just an example of another manufacturer's. And this can happen also within 2 years, you can start to see a difference. So how we've prolonged the life of the product is by using higher quality components. For example, we use a higher quality copper sourced from Europe, which is 99.9% pure. We'll use the sets will be from Taiwan, which is a reputable country producing chips. The resistors we get from Japan, again, a reputable country for producing the resistors. And then even the PVC casing on the outside of the wire, that we source that from the US. And so by taking these higher quality components, manufacturing them all together, and putting them all together will create a much higher quality product, and you'll get a much more stable product as well. We've done a few engineering tweaks to the bulbs as well. As you'll notice, inside our bulbs, we usually have these optical cones in here, which help direct the light and up to 270 degrees. And it behaves a little bit like a magnifying glass too, so it gives the illusion of it being a little bit brighter. And so we found that we're actually able to create the same brightness as, say, a 0.6 or 0.7 watt bulb, which is what competitors use. But we will use, say, a 0.45 watt bulb instead. So we're using, 0.45 watts means you can have longer runs, which means more creativity and flexibility in your installations. But the other thing is, and more importantly, is that when you push less power through an LED chip, it's less taxing on that chip, and so it will be more stable. We could dial it up to 0.6 or 0.7, but then we would compromise the stability. So we found that by combining the optical cone, making sure there's UV stabilizers in the bulb so it stays nice and clear for a really long time, even if it's exposed to direct sun for years. This will all add to having a really bright bulb that is equally as bright as a 0.6 or 0.7, but we only need to run 0.45. And it's more stable by doing so. Okay, so let's take a look at some profitability calculations here. Let's say it's in a leasing model. These are the purple numbers here, the leasing numbers. Year one leasing, it's a $1,500 project, and the revenue the cost of goods sold will be about $850. That means you're going to profit $650. That's year one in a leasing model. And of course, you're going to be buying the lights, so your cost of goods sold is quite high. In the selling model, that same job, you'll probably charge $2,500 because you're selling the lights to the product or lights to the customer. And your cost of goods sold will be the same, lights and labor, total about $850, but you're making a higher profit because you're selling the lights to them. So you're going to get $1,650 of profit. The year two, things switch a little bit. So the leasing profit will increase to $1,150. Again, you're charging $1,500 because it stays the same. But your cost of goods sold are only $350 because it's just labor. Whereas in the selling model, you're going to only charge $1,200 because you're only charging for the labor. You've already sold them the lights. And since the lights are already owned by the customer, your cost of goods sold are only the labor cost, $350. So your total profit in year two and year three and year four and year five of a selling model will be just $850. And in the leasing model in year two, year three, year four, year five will be $1,150. So let's take a look at what that looks like over time in terms of profitability. This is the total amount of profit earned over a period of time. This is cumulative. So, for example, the blue line is the leasing model. Again, we make a little bit less the first year than the selling. And then eventually the lines cross over at about year four. But year four, then the leasing model will earn you a larger lifetime value from that customer in terms of profitability. So if it's a client you're going to keep it for a long time, you're going to make more money using the leasing model. Especially if it's over 4 years. If you lose that client earlier in less than 4 years, you would have done better in the selling model. So it depends on what you're thinking you can achieve in terms of lifetime value from that customer, how long you can hold that customer, and might dictate which model you decide. And of course, when you talk to the customer, and you can explain to the customer that, if you're going to hold on to the lights for 4 years or more, it makes sense for them to own them. But if you're wearing the leasing hat, obviously you wouldn't tell them that. You're going to communicate the sale as in, hey, you don't have to worry about anything. We'll take care of it all. We'll own the lights, but we'll take care of all the maintenance, and you don't need to be concerned about any of that stuff. So if you take a look at the bottom here, I've totaled what the year one and year two fees are, and then year three, year four, and year five, and you can see where the total crosses over. So for example, year three total is just year one plus year two plus year three total equals $2,950 for the leasing option. So the point is that at about year four, if you're using the leasing model, you're going to be more profitable for the lifetime of that customer. So the biggest errors I see are setting prices based on hope and not math. And it really, you need to pick a model because it's what you don't want to pick a model because it's what everybody else started with, and not what's right for your own growth. Like for example, let's make the jobs a little bit bigger. Let's add 2 zeros to the earlier figures in this case of a large installation, of a large commercial contract, that is. So let's say you get a $150,000 lease contract. It's a big commercial municipal job. And are you prepared for a potential $85,000 cost of goods sold? That means you're going to make $65,000 in gross margin. And then And then in subsequent years, you'll gross $115,000 annually. Or is it better to do the same job for, say, $250,000 in the first year and make $165,000 in margin, then do it again in subsequent years, making just $85,000 gross margins annually? So again, by looking at the chart, if we just look at these figures, by add 2 zeros to the ends of all these figures, you might have a different tune if you knew you had to come up with such a high amount of cash in order to cover your cost of goods sold in using a leasing model. So that's why, like, in a selling model, if cash flow is an issue, the selling model is much better with larger commercial jobs when you start to push 6 figures. So if your goal is to eventually one day get 6-figure commercial jobs, but cash flow is an issue, maybe the selling model would be a better option for you. So you just need to consider, how much risk are you willing to take? What's your cash flow is like, and is it better to get more money up front than in the future? Other thing is to consider is the copycat strategy. What does your customer want? Don't just worry about the competition. If you listen to your customers the closest, you're going to win the work the majority of the time. So really listen to what your customer wants. If it's a commercial customer, do they want to lease? Do they want to buy? Are they concerned about writing off the project through set lease terms over a period of 5 years? That might make more sense to them financially. But hear them out and see what makes sense, and then work with them on that. Hidden expenses. There are hidden expenses around each of the models, but one thing you want to keep in mind is that you should start budgeting for replacements after about the 5-year mark. Our warranty is good for 5 years, but for year 6, maybe start to consider maybe a 10% budget for replacements. Year 7, maybe a 20% budget for replacements. Maybe year 8, a 30% budget for replacements. And then year 9 would be a 40% budget for replacements. So that means if I go 10 plus 20 plus 30 plus 40, that's 100%. So after year 9, at year 10, you would have a full replacement of the lights. And that would be pretty satisfactory. Basically every 10 years, the customers cycle through all the lights and they have an entirely brand new set. And that's reasonable enough to expect that sort of longevity of the lights. I've seen lights up 15 years and they're still working, pretty well. But this is what you should, consider budgeting in terms of replacements. Is after that 5-year mark, start with a 10, then a 20, 30, 40% replacements all the way up to year 9. Another common mistake is missed upsell opportunity. Always look for opportunities, and I can't suggest enough, really train your technicians to look for opportunities and really incentivize them. The reason I tend to gravitate towards a selling model in my installation company was because year 1, which is obviously a higher cost, kind of breaks the seal to a certain budget threshold. So if the revenue is, say, $2,500 in the first year, and it would normally be $850 in the second year, I could often get the customer to stomach a $1,650 add-on, and their display would always be looking a little bit larger and fresh each year. And so Year 3 might be maybe a smaller add-on. Maybe it's just $1,000 because again, we've increased the scope of the project, but there's still room to the $2,500 threshold that they spent in year 1. So if you have sold them $2,500 in the first year, knowing that their next year would only be about $850, maybe next year you can talk to them about upselling to get them back up to that $2,500 spend. And there's a high likelihood that you'll be able to close that sale because they've already spent $2,500 in lights last year. So they're somewhat comfortable with spending that amount. And it's been a full year since they did it. And so they may be more inclined to take you up on that, on decorating that extra tree or that other section of a roof line. So how you talk about your service matters as much as the numbers. Leasing means that you remove the hassle. Selling means their home is show ready for years, right? There's a pitch for every client that you can use. So leasing, again, like set it and forget it. Holiday magic for busy families and businesses. Really emphasizing the convenience and include the professional maintenance and worry-free enjoyment throughout that term. And for the selling model, your pitch might be you're going to own the display for your home. It's going to be designed and to your home, and it's going to be perfectly matched, everything cut to size, obviously, and just like it is in the leasing, but really drive that point home in the selling model. And just emphasize the convenience and, of course, the warranty that they're protected for, up to 5 years, and highlight that the long-term investment benefits. So remember at that 5-year mark, it's going to cost the customer less over that period of time if they own the lights using the selling model. But there are universal offerings that you should include for both models. Doesn't matter which is, they should include the removal. You should include that there's free storage. Again, use free storage for the leasing and the selling model. And remind them that upgrades are possible in any year. They don't need to be bound by those. So I would drive that point home. And then again, just stressing the professional installation quality, regardless of model. It doesn't really matter. Let's discuss a little bit about commercial. So simplicity is key. Every commercial client has a unique why. Ask them why. Why are they doing this? Who are they doing this for? Who are their customers? Then pitch a process that clearly outlines the path to achieving their goal in the most simple means possible. It can be, maybe it's a multi-year project with add-ons that meet budgets. If you get a no that is too expensive from that commercial customer, then just explain to them, look, maybe we just light the entrance area instead. We don't need to do the whole property. And then once you do that, they quickly see the benefits of the lights. And I can't tell you how many jobs, we thought we lost. And then we just go back to them and be like, instead of doing the whole thing, why don't we just do this one small part, this one tree or these few trees at this one area? And I can't tell you how many times we've done that. And then they come back to us, a few weeks later and be like, hey, actually, can we do the rest of it as well? That happens like all the time. So don't take no for an answer. This is such a creative business. There's always different things that you can decorate. One thing to all remember too is, good salespeople sell features. Okay, great salespeople, they're selling outcomes, and remarkable salespeople sell feelings. Okay, and the feelings are based on a look and a convenience. So you need to really show them the path from contacting you to their goal, which is, happy customers and happy tenants potentially. And I find the best way to show that path is through photos. You can use case studies as well, and really outline a simple, clear process to getting to that point. You want to leave them feeling good after meeting with that customer, knowing exactly what's coming their way if they choose to hire you. Because people don't remember what you say, okay? They only remember how you make them feel. And your goal with every interaction is to simply leave the customer feeling better. If they feel better after meeting with you, you're probably going to have another meeting with them. And that's all you can ask for is that constant building that relationship, and hopefully it gets to a point where that next meeting is an installation. Other considerations with the commercial clients are obviously consider contract security, making sure that the long-term agreements provide predictable revenue stream for you. And then obviously maintenance clarity, really define who's going to look after the lights and who's going to repair them if you need to replace those lights, if you need to bring heavy equipment in, and make sure that's clearly written and everybody understands who's responsible for what. Budget considerations. Some property managers may prefer to amortize the costs over time, so a leasing model might be better for them. They can do that through leasing model. I mean, they can do this internally as well through their accounting, but every commercial customer will be a little bit different. So just ask what will work best with them. And, and this is where you can start to maybe use a bit of a hybrid model. Some customers might be a leasing model, and you can offer a selling model to other customers depending on what their needs are. Just be careful with offering both, because it does complicate the business a little bit more. You'll want to make sure you keep detailed notes on which option the customer is going with. So your decision is going to be, when you decide you're going to assess your goals, determine if you need cash now or prefer long-term steady income. That's your lease versus buying. And also consider your 5-year business vision and your growth strategy. Is leasing most conducive for that, or is selling more conducive to that? If you plan on getting into more and more commercial jobs, maybe the selling model might be better. If you plan on doing just mostly residential, then maybe the leasing model is a little bit better. But again, you need to also analyze your market. Evaluate your resources too. Calculate your available capital for inventory investment. So if you're using the leasing model and you need to buy a lot of lights, then you need to make sure you have the cash to make that inventory investment. If you're using the selling model, you get a lot more of that cash up front. Also consider your maintenance capabilities as well. Again, analyze your market, making sure that you research what others are offering in your area, and also consider your local customer preferences as well. Again, we've noticed in Canada, most people use a selling model, and then in the US, most people use the leasing model. But feel free to consider testing both models. You can run a pilot program and see how that works out for you, and then go with whatever is the most popular if you need to choose one. But it is possible to use a hybrid system where you can develop a flexible set of options to meet obviously your diverse client needs. And then you can track performance metrics as well on each of these jobs, and then refine your approach as your business matures. Okay, so these are some topics you'll want to discuss with your team. Discuss what your current model is if you already have one, and consider the pricing and address any profitability concerns with your team. And lastly, develop an action plan for your business to implement whichever model you think is going to be the best going forward. And, every business is unique. Everybody seems to have a unique situation, and each model has its own set of challenges. So have a close look at what those challenges are and consider what would be the least, or what would be the easiest to implement in your SOPs. Okay, so if you have any questions at all with the leasing versus selling models, I'm happy to answer them. You can always email me. My email is daniel@bigstarlights.com. Feel free to reach out there or through the BSL community as well. We have our community calls bi-weekly, so if you want to pop into one of those, I'm usually there, and we can discuss some specific questions a little bit more in depth. I hope you enjoyed this presentation, and I hope to see you guys at the next one and next month. Have a great evening.